Welcome to today's deep dive.
Hmm.
I want you to imagine for a second that you're tasked with building this massive skyscraper.
Okay.
And one day, out of nowhere, you suddenly get a limitless supply of concrete just dropped right onto your construction site.
I mean, you'd be thrilled, right?
Right. You're super excited. But then you look at your inventory and you realize you only have like a tiny fixed amount of steel.
Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah, a huge problem. How do you keep building? Because you can't just make a skyscraper out of concrete alone. It needs that structural skeleton to actually hold it all together.
Exactly.
So to find out how the Amazon rainforest is currently trying to solve that exact puzzle, we are diving into this genuinely fascinating 2026 research article. It was published in Nature Communications.
Yeah, the title is Amazonian Understory Forests Change Phosphorus Acquisition Strategies Under Elevated CO2.
Right. And today's mission is really to explore this invisible underground war for nutrients. Because, well, it's ultimately going to determine if the Amazon can actually be the climate savior we all kind of want it to be.
It is such a critical dynamic to understand, especially since, we constantly hear the Amazon referred to as the lungs of the earth.
Yeah, all the time.
Right. And the popular conception is just that as human activity pumps more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, these vast tropical forests will just act as a buffer.
Like they'll just breathe it all in.
Exactly. They breathe it in, grow faster, and sequester all that carbon. But, I mean, a lung can only breathe if the biological system it belongs to actually has the necessary nutrients to function.
So you can have all the air in the world,
Yeah.
but without the underlying biology, growth just stops.
Right. It completely halts.
And so in our skyscraper scenario, the concrete is the carbon dioxide in the air, and the steel is a really highly scarce soil nutrient, which is phosphorus. And this paper takes us quite literally into the dirt, right, to see what happens when you give a forest infinite concrete, but you strictly ration its steel.
And the setup for the experiment is just, it's visually striking. They use this program called Amazon Face.
Which is located, what, about 70 kilometers north of Manaus?
Yeah, deep in the Brazilian Amazon. And they built these massive open-top chambers right in the middle of a mature primary forest.
Oh, I just picture these huge plastic rings, right? About 3 meters high, sitting completely integrated into this dense jungle understory.
It's wild, and the scale of the intervention is what makes it so valuable. Into half of those massive rings, they continuously pumped extra carbon dioxide during daylight
Of
hours,
flooding the zone.
flooding it. They elevated the local atmosphere by about 300 parts per million above normal background levels.
Which is, that's basically perfectly simulating the atmospheric conditions our planet is likely to reach in the next few decades, right?
Exactly, that's the goal. And then they just observe how the native mature trees react in real time. But to really grasp the magnitude of the plant's reaction, we have to look at the ground they're standing on.
Yeah, actual dirt.
The dirt. About 60% of Amazonian forests grow on these geologically ancient, highly weathered soils. They're known as feral soils.
Which means, like, they've been subjected to millions of years of just torrential tropical rain,
Just absolute downpours. And over millennia, that just washes all the soluble nutrients away.
leaving it totally depleted.
Deeply depleted of phosphorus. And the really frustrating part for the plants is that much of the trace phosphorus that does remain in that deep soil, it's essentially locked away in a chemical vault.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it binds super tightly to iron and aluminum oxides, or it gets trapped inside these highly complex organic molecules.
So the plant roots can't even get to it.
No, they can't just absorb it. It is entirely inaccessible. It's effectively like having a massive bank account that the bank just absolutely refuses to let you withdraw from.
Okay, so knowing that the soil is basically empty of the steel these trees need to build their cellular structures, the results of this elevated CO2 experiment are, well, they're genuinely baffling at first glance.
You really are.
Because despite this severe lack of available phosphorus, the understory plants inside those carbon-flooded chambers, they experience this massive CO2 fertilization effect.
The numbers are staggering.
They really are. The plants increased their overall carbon assimilation by 67%.
Wow.
Their leaf area grew by 51%, and their stem diameter increased by 65%.
Which, forces a very difficult biological question. A 60% increase in physical mass, that requires an enormous amount of structural building blocks.
Right, you can't just manifest phosphorus out of thin air.
No, it has to come from the physical environment.
So, wait, hold on. If the soil is essentially completely tapped out, how on earth did the plants manage to get 50 to 60% bigger. Like, where is this hitty stash of nutrients suddenly coming from?
Well, to find the answer, the researchers had to literally dig beneath the surface and painstakingly analyze the root systems. And what they discovered, it fundamentally changes our understanding of tropical botany.
Okay, I'm hooked. What did they find?
So these plants do not just have a single static root system doing one job. They actually deploy two completely different, highly specialized root strategies at the exact same time.
Wait, simultaneous.
Simultaneously.
Mhm.
And it entirely depends on the depth of the soil they are currently navigating.
Okay, so let's start right at the surface, where I guess the conditions are maybe a bit more forgiving. Because if you walk through the Amazon, the very top layer of the ground isn't actually dirt, right? It's the leaf litter layer.
Exactly.
It's this thick mat of decaying leaves, twigs, dead insects, all this organic matter just resting on top of the mineral soil. So what exactly are the roots doing up there to find phosphorus?
Up in that leaf litter layer, the plants adopt this highly aggressive do-it-yourself foraging strategy.
Yeah.
When the research team analyzed the fine roots growing upward into this decaying mat, they noticed a massive physical transformation. Under the elevated CO2, the roots didn't actually increase their net productivity.
Wait, what does that mean?
In other words, the plant didn't dump a bunch of extra metabolic energy into growing heavier, thicker roots.
Oh, got it. So they didn't just build like a massive thick root trunk to bulldoze through the leaves.
Far from it, they radically altered their morphology, their actual physical shape. The researchers measured a significant increase in a metric called specific root length, or SRL,
Okay.
alongside a dramatic decrease in the actual root diameter.
Oh, so if they are keeping the total mass the exact same, but the diameter shrinks while the length explodes, the plant is basically taking the exact same amount of biological material and just stretching it out as thin as possible.
Exactly.
Like it's growing thousands of tiny, extra long, ultra-thin fingers to just scrape up every last microscopic crumb of phosphorus from those dead leaves.
That visual is incredibly accurate, actually. Root tips are the active hotspots for nutrient uptake, and they're also where the plant releases exudates.
Which are what, like chemicals?
Yeah, chemical compounds secreted to help break down the surrounding organic matter. So by producing significantly longer, finer roots, the plants massively increase their overall surface area.
That makes total sense.
Right. They intercept a much larger volume of that litter layer. They are effectively maximizing their physical contact with the decaying organic matter because that is where organic phosphorus is temporarily stored.
Before the rain inevitably washes it down into the hard mineral soil below, where it gets locked away in that vault.
You got it.
And the data actually proves this DIY scraping strategy is working. Because after a year of running the elevated CO2, the researchers measured the actual decomposing leaf litter inside the chambers. And they found a significant, measurable decrease in its total phosphorus concentration.
Yeah, they were successfully sucking the litter dry.
Just completely strip mining the surface layer.
It's a highly efficient scavenging tactic.
Hmm.
But, the true genius of this biological system reveals itself when you dig just 15 centimeters deeper.
Okay, so if you scrape away that decaying leaf layer and you hit the actual hard mineral dirt, the roots are doing the exact opposite.
Yes.
Which to me feels totally counterintuitive, because if the plant needs nutrients so badly to support a 60% growth spurt above ground, why on earth would it shut down its root factories below ground?
Well, it comes down to basic metabolic economics. Building and maintaining those long, ultrafine roots we just talked about is relatively easy in the soft, loose, airy leaf litter.
Right.
But trying to physically push those same delicate, fine roots through dense, hard, clay-rich mineral soil, that requires an immense amount of energy and carbon.
Like it's just physically exhausting.
Extremely. It's metabolically expensive for the plant. So instead of doing the hard physical labor themselves in the deep soil, the plants shift to an outsourcing strategy.
Outsourcing. That is fascinating. Who exactly is a tree outsourcing its labor to?
Yeah. Specialized fungi, specifically arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, or AMF for short.
AMF, okay.
The researchers found that while the plant's own root productivity in the deep soil dropped by an astonishing 80%,
Wow, 80%.
right, the colonization of the remaining roots by these symbiotic fungi exploded by 117%.
Are you kidding?
The fungal coverage jumped from about 25% of the roots to roughly 56%.
Okay, so it's literally like firing your own internal, highly expensive sales team because the travel costs of navigating that hard soil are just way too high. And instead, you hire this highly specialized external PR firm to just do all the heavy lifting for you.
That is the exact economic dynamic happening underground. And the AMF PR firm is infinitely better equipped for the job.
How so?
Well, fungi produce these microscopic biological threads called hyphae, and these hyphae are vastly thinner than even the absolute finest plant root.
Oh, wow.
Because they're so incredibly small, they can literally penetrate the microscopic pores in the hard mineral soil. They can squeeze between silica grains.
Things a root could never do.
Never. And they secrete specialized organic acids that actively dissolve rock and mineral bonds, literally mining inorganic phosphorus from places the plant root could never physically reach.
That is incredible. And the payment for this mining operation is carbon, right?
Yes.
Because the plant has an absolute surplus of carbon right now, thanks to all the infinite concrete, the elevated CO2 in the air.
Exactly. It pumps the excess carbon down to the roots, hands it over to the fungi, and in exchange, the fungi deliver the newly freed phosphorus.
It is a flawless symbiotic trade.
It really is. And because the plant is now heavily reliant on this fungal infrastructure in the deep soil, it fundamentally changes the architecture of the few roots it actually does keep down there.
Oh, right. The paper mentioned they noted a sharp increase in root tissue density.
Yes.
Meaning those remaining roots became significantly denser, tougher, and just harder.
Right, because since the plant is investing its entire carbon fortune into this fungal partnership, it needs to protect the central root hubs where the trade actually happens.
That makes total sense.
Higher root tissue density protects the roots against hungry soil, herbivores, nematodes, physical damage. It drastically increases their lifespan.
Okay, so you have this really conservative, heavily defended, collaborative life strategy down in the deep soil, paired perfectly with this highly aggressive, independent scavenging strategy at the surface.
Yep.
That spatial partitioning is just mind-blowing. It really highlights how dynamic and active trees actually are.
Yeah.
But the deeper we get into this invisible economy, the more complicated it gets, right? Because the plants and their fungal partners, they're the only living things down in the dirt.
Not at all. The soil is absolutely teeming with a vast native microbial community.
Right.
We're talking about millions of bacteria and other independent microorganisms per single gram of soil.
Yeah.
And every single one of them also desperately needs phosphorus to survive and replicate.
Right. And this brings us to the actual underground war. Because if the plants are suddenly hypercharged by all this CO2, and they're successfully strip mining both the surface and the deep soil to support their huge new leaves above ground,
Yeah.
are they basically just robbing the native microbes blind?
Well, the disruption to the local microbial ecosystem is profound. When the researchers analyzed the mineral soil after a year of elevated CO2, they found a massive 77.6% drop in total organic phosphorus.
Wait, hold on. Almost 80% of the entire organic phosphorus reserve just vanished.
Just entirely depleted.
That's insane.
Think of organic phosphorus as the literal savings account of the soil ecosystem. It consists of dead organic matter that hasn't been fully broken down yet.
Okay.
It has to be mineralized, which means chemically chopped up by enzymes, before any organism can actually absorb and use it.
Right.
Under normal historical conditions, plants, fungi, and microbes sort of share this space, right? They slowly break down organic matter at a natural, balanced pace. But the sudden injection of elevated CO2 completely rewrote the rules of this microscopic economy.
And the way the scientists measured this war is just so fascinating. Because they didn't just count the microbes, right? They looked at their weapons.
Exactly.
The paper talks extensively about the extracellular C to P enzyme stoichiometry, which, I mean, sounds incredibly dense, but it's really just the mathematical ratio of carbon-eating tools to phosphorus-eating tools, right?
That is exactly how to think about it. Enzymes are essentially molecular scissors that microbes secrete into the soil to chop up large, complex molecules into bite-sized food.
Okay.
Microbes operate on a really strict biological budget. They can only afford to build so many enzymes. Historically, they invest a massive portion of their budget into secreting enzymes designed to break down tough carbon compounds, things like silibiosidase and beta-glucosidase.
Because carbon is their primary energy source. They need it to live.
Right. But inside those elevated CO2 chambers, the researchers found a sharp, sudden decrease in those specific carbon-eating enzymes.
Why?
Because the microbes simply didn't need them anymore. Remember the massive surplus of carbon the plant is pulling from the air? Yeah.
Well, the tree can't use all of it for physical growth because it's limited by the lack of phosphorus. So the plant ends up pumping lots of extra, easily digestible sugars. These are known as labile carbon, exudates directly out of its roots and into the soil.
Oh, so it's like a rain of free candy for the microbes.
It is free, unbounded energy. The microbes suddenly find themselves literally swimming in easily accessible sugar. They no longer have to expend any of their biological budget, creating expensive molecular scissors to chop up tough dead leaves just to get a little bit of carbon energy.
Wow. Okay, so if the microbes have all this free sugar and free energy, I would normally assume their populations would just explode, right? And they would completely take over the soil ecosystem.
You would think so, yeah. But population growth also requires structural building blocks. It requires phosphorus.
Ah, the steel. The steel. So instead of just reproducing wildly, the microbes shift their entire biological workforce to a new goal. Since carbon is now free, they take their entire enzyme building budget and they redirect it. They turn their attention entirely to the single limiting nutrient, which is phosphorus.
That perfectly explains the stoichiometry shift. They start building carbon scissors and they start exclusively building phosphorus scissors.
Precisely. And this sparks this intense, hyper-competitive gold rush. Because the plants are aggressively expanding their surface roots and simultaneously deploying an army of AMF fungi in the deep soil, so they are sucking up phosphorus at an unprecedented rate.
Man.
The relative investment by microbes in phosphorus cycling enzymes remains incredibly high, but the actual pool of organic phosphorus is shrinking rapidly. So everyone, the towering trees, the microscopic fungi, the native soil bacteria, they are all fighting desperately over a disappearing resource.
So the plants are effectively feeding the microbes free sugar to keep them distracted and energized, while at the exact same time using their massive structural advantage to fiercely outcompete those same microbes for the actual vital structural nutrients.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is a ruthless microscopic underground war.
It is a phenomenal example of biological competition. And the sheer 80% drop in that organic phosphorus savings account, it proves just how dominant and aggressive the plant-fungal alliance becomes when you give it unlimited atmospheric carbon.
Right.
They are systematically draining the historical reserves of the soil just to build those bigger leaves and thicker stems above ground.
So kind of zooming out from the microscopic level, what does this actually mean for you, the listener?
Right.
Why should you care about a turf war over enzymes in some remote Brazilian forest?
Well, because it totally reframes how we look at the future of our entire planet.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
next time you read a headline about, planting 1 trillion trees to absorb human CO2 emissions or relying on the mighty Amazon to be our ultimate infinite carbon sink, you will know that the secret bottleneck isn't the air. It's the dirt.
Yes.
Earth's overall climate resilience is entirely dependent on this microscopic underground economy.
And the critical takeaway from the Amazon Face program is that the Amazon can adapt to higher CO2 levels in the short term. We have empirically seen that it is possible.
Right.
These understory trees are incredibly smart and adaptable. They use sophisticated spatial partitioning to squeeze every last usable drop of phosphorus out of a highly impoverished environment. They optimize their entire physical architecture to survive the changing atmosphere.
But there is a catch to this rapid adaptation, and it feels like a massive one.
It is a towering caveat,
Yeah.
and it leaves us with an incredibly important lingering question.
What's that?
Well, the total absolute amount of phosphorus in the Amazon basin isn't actually increasing.
Right, no one is dropping new steel onto the jungle construction site.
Exactly. The existing phosphorus is just being cycled much, much faster than it ever has been before. It is being violently pulled out of the decaying leaves on the surface and stripped from the organic soil reserves deep below at just breakneck speed.
And all of that just to
Yeah.
build this new temporary flush of massive green growth.
Right.
So if these plants are hyper-optimizing their root systems to strip mine the soil today, what happens in 20, 30, or 50 years when the soil savings account is completely, irreversibly tapped out?
That is the ultimate unknown that climate scientists are racing to figure out right now. Because if the chemical savings account is entirely drained, the biological growth simply must stop, no matter how much excess CO2 we pump into the air.
Wow.
We are really forced to ask ourselves, does the lung of the earth eventually just run out of breath simply because it ran out of nutrients?